Welcome everyone to this webinar by REGMIFA. My name is Edwige Takasi. I'm a board member of REGMIFA, and I'm welcoming you to this webinar where we are going to explain a little bit about our REGMIFA Sustainability Leadership Program. I'm here with a couple of other people, which I will introduce in a minute. But before digging into the program for the webinar, I'd like to give you a quick update on the fund. I believe that will set the context a little bit. So the fund size has been growing to a total assets of 218 million as of March 2026. With new A-share subscriptions in 2025 and further commitments of 40 million in notes. So that's very good news for us. In terms of the disbursement and portfolio growth, we are pretty steady. We had a historical high annual disbursement of 95 million in 2025. And we have continued to deploy 34 million thus far in 2026. So the trend is quite positive. And in terms of the fund performance, that reflects as well. It remains quite strong with all target dividends furnished as of Q1 2026. I should also state that the fund portfolio as of today stands at 191 million at market. It's well diversified, targeting 66 investees in 22 countries. And that is all in all 14 currencies.
Goedendag, dit is de voicemail van 068.
Sorry about that. In terms of the technical assistance activities, and I think that's what brings us together here, and that's a nice transition to the next element. REGMIFA launched with the financial support of KfW the Sustainability Leadership Program in 2025, which is a flagship executive initiative that is aimed at strengthening governance, sustainability, sustainable leadership in general, and also strategic alignment among our partner lending institutions. I'm very happy to share a little bit more detail about the program. You should know that what you're about to hear is not just a program update. We've made it in the form of a conversation. And our aim is to showcase why technical assistance matters. I think we're all convinced about it, but it's good to have proof points. And now more than ever, it is important to continue with that. We want to show what technical assistance can also achieve when it's done well. Especially in a context where, as we know, budgets are under pressure. So we believe that it is our responsibility as investors to make the case for TA as a strategic tool to further the sectors we invest in. This REGMIFA Sustainable Leadership Program, the SLP as we call it, it is our proof of concept. Today you will hear not just from us, but you will also hear from the people who experienced it. We will start with Mwila Maseka. She will tell us about the origin story about the Sustainable Leadership Program. Then she will hand over to Marijke Wolter, who will explain about the program's design and give facts and impact. And then we'll come to the most important part of this webinar, which will be a conversation between Marijke as the moderator, Mamodike Magoba, as well as Sadiq Mwai. This is basically our way to bring back voices from the room. Those two graduates will share their own personal experience about the leadership program, and then we'll come to closing remarks. I want to state as well that you should feel free to share your questions in the chat. We'll try to pick those questions as we go throughout the program. And then we'll also have a 15 minutes Q&A session at the end so that we can cover the remaining questions. Mwila, I will hand over to you in a second. You should know that Mwila is the principal lead for technical assistance at SYCB, the REGMIFA TA Facility Manager. And she's also the lead behind the Sustainability Leadership Program. Willa has been with the REGMIFA TAF team since 2016 and will take us through the origins of the Sustainability Leadership Program. Willa, over to you.
Thank you, Edwige, and hello to everyone. So, as Edwige shared, I have been a part of the TA facility team for the last decade, working directly with REGMIFA investees in developing and also deploying technical assistance. So to start with today, from the vantage point of the TA facility, I'd like to take you back to the beginning, just to sort of set the scene as to why we created this program in the first place. So since its inception in 2011, the TA facility's mandate has been to strengthen institutions that REGMIFA as a fund invests in. And we've done so in a way that is complementary to the fund's investment mandate as well. So while the fund is providing this financing, we also work alongside the MFIs and banks to sort of build their leadership, their governance, and also their product offering, but ultimately to contribute towards their sustainability. And over the years, through our partnerships that we have built with these banks and really ultimately through honest and open conversations that we've had with their leaders and the various stuff that we've engaged with through TA, we observed a pattern. And the gap kept coming up. It didn't matter the country, it didn't matter the institution. So REGMIFA investees really today are operating in some of the most complex and fast-changing markets. And their leadership is having to deal with different forms of disruption, from observing how technology is reshaping the landscape and deciding who can access financial services. They have to navigate the topic of climate change, not as a future risk now, but truly as a present reality that already affects their clients and portfolios. And then also they have to continuously respond to regulators who are raising the bar in terms of governance, ESG, and consumer protection. And then, of course, they also have to answer to investors like yourselves, who rightly expect a credible measure and impact narrative in return for your capital. So on top of all that, and actually sometimes because of all that, many of these institutions are going through significant internal changes and transitions related to leadership succession, organizational growth, and the challenge of building something that truly lasts in this changing world. So you can only imagine with this backdrop that these leaders are carrying a great deal, and they are responsible for what the future of impact investing will look like. So it was on that premise really that we as the TA facility, we felt strongly, and also reflecting on our mandate, we established that we needed to do more to support them. So when I speak of more, it's because we come from the setup of delivering technical assistance as the core work that we do. And really delivering TA one institution at a time is valuable, and we have accompanied the banks well and seen the value that this has driven within the institutions. However, we have recognized that we need to do something more than individual TA, something that really this simply cannot achieve on its own. When you look at individual technical assistance, it cannot create the shared language, the cross-institutional dialogue, and the peer networks that can only emerge when the leaders from across the REGMIFA portfolio are able to come together and learn together. And it's only a fund that REGMIFA that can truly facilitate a platform such as this, where this shared language that is needed to drive these core topics that all the banks are facing today, and the required dialogue and also peer network building can truly materialize. And this is basically the insights that we received from the banks, and which also gave the birth to the Sustainability Leadership Program. So that's sort of a little bit around the inception of it and what inspired us to put this program together. So we then went into putting together the design and the structure of this program about 3 years and some ago. And when it came to the structure and the format of the program, we really made a deliberate design choice. And this design was drawn from well-regarded programs in our field, such as the Harvard Business School Action program on strategic leadership, and also the Boulder Institute of Microfinance, which some of you may be well versed with, as well as our own experience in leadership and capacity building across the development finance sector. We were very deliberate in terms of designing the program delivery as a partnership between an expert consulting house that understands the landscape in which we and our banks operate in, and a business school, which we achieved through the partnership with IPC and the University of Cape Town, where we could truly achieve this objective of peer learning, and we were able to achieve the intent of who would be in the room in terms of seniority, institutions, and geographies. So in terms of practice, what the SLP looks like today is that the program has reached 23 institutions across 14 countries in Africa. We have 66 participants so far who have benefited from the project. And all of these participants comprise of board members and C-suite executives from the banks, each sending at least one board member and 2 C-suite executives. So to date, we are now in our 3rd cohort, and including also for the first time a dedicated French-speaking cohort. So the first 2 that we did were in English. And each cohort has followed a similar structured journey, starting with a virtual onboarding, and then 2 residential in-person sessions, each of 3 days. But in between the 2 in-person sessions, we also have some webinars in order to keep the engagement and learning going on. So both the residential sessions are held at the University of Cape Town Graduate Business School here in Cape Town, where I am based, together with my other technical assistance facility team. And really, this setup of being on a university campus was a deliberate choice, and one that the participants consistently have told us that has made a real difference in terms of their learning experience, which you will definitely get to hear from later from the 2 participants who will be able to share their reflections with you. So I will stop here in terms of sharing my insights and contribution to today's session. And for now, I'll hand back over to, I do believe it's Edwige. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Willa, for sharing the backstage story. I think it helped understand a little bit better where we come from. I'm going to hand over now to Mahaike as well. She will take us through the program itself. Mahaike is the Director of Skills and Employment at IPC, a leading consulting firm in development finance and responsible for the overall program design and facilitation. She will explain the topics, the learning approach, which is a very important part of the overall success. And as well, she will explain the impacts of the program and discuss with 2 graduates so that they can share what the program actually means to them. Mahaike, over to you.
Thank you, Edwige, and thank you, Mila, also for the backstory. And very excited to be here today. So I'll keep it brief. I'll just add on a bit to the facts and figures that Mila has just presented. And if you allow me, I will just take 2 or 3 introductory sentences about how excited we were to do this assignment, because it is not every day that we have this opportunity to have people like Sadiq and Mamudike in the classroom and actually discussing with you, right? So all the decision makers for all these institutions, and simply to understand what challenges you're facing and to support you in figuring out how to do better in the future. This, I think, for the whole team is super exciting to be able to do that. Today, the focus is not going to be on surveys or anything that we conducted. This we'll do at program closing. The focus today is really on the impact that we have observed thanks to targeted interviews that we have done with a relatively large number of graduates. What I'll also give you now at the start, before we hear from Sadiq and Mamudike a bit what it was like to live through the program, is to have a quick look at the topics, just so you get an idea of what the content was about. And then we'll look a little bit about what makes this program maybe different from many other training programs out there. So before I do that, hang on, of course, very important to present. So Edwige, thank you. You have mentioned IPC, and Mwila, you had also mentioned the fact that this was a partnership, or it is a partnership, together with the Graduate School of Business at the University of Cape Town, so one of the most renowned business schools on the African continent. And from their side, we also have today here David Makova, who's the program director, and who's probably also very happy later on to answer any questions you may have on the role that the university played and on their engagement in this program. Good, let's move on to the next slide and have a quick look at the content and the different modules, so you get a bit more of an idea what's behind this title, right? So overall, we have 7 topical modules spread across the 2 in-person sessions of 3 days each. And then we have 2 webinars, which are structured to connect to the in-person session topics and build on them, and they take place between the in-person sessions. Why? Because it's much easier to get people's attention and to weave in important messages in webinars once the group already knows each other, knows about the value of the program. Now, first module, sustainability leadership. This is the basis. So we opted for a relatively broad definition of sustainability, which underpins the whole program and runs as one of 2 golden threads throughout the program. And I'm sure we'll hear a bit more from Sadiq and Mamudike about that later on how this was important. Then the second module, this is the second golden thread, right? So from each of the participating financial institutions, we usually had 3 people, and this is all board members, so executive and non-executive, and they came together. Yes, so here in this module, we really talked about how does cooperation on the board level function? What is the role of the management versus the non-executive board members, and how can they drive strategy together? And this is the golden thread, but also a module in itself in the program. Then the modules 3 and 4, they are closely connected, as you can imagine. So we first spend some time on looking also very much at the opportunities that are in front of the financial institutions present when it comes to climate change. But then we also talked about the reporting side, of course, what they need to report to their investors, but also how can they use this data for their own strategic decision making, right? So not simply collect data and pass it on, but rather say, okay, how is this useful for us? What data are we collecting? Do we understand how good the data quality is, and how can it be useful for us, for our strategic orientation? And of course, linking it all back to the sustainability question. Then after the 2 webinars, of which the first one I think was almost everybody's favorite. I think when I asked people graduating from the program, they all said they liked the people side best. Yeah, so this question of how can we bring our staff along with all of these challenges that we're facing, but also how can we select the right people in our institutions, and how can we make sure the right people progress, and how can we train our managers? So this was quite decisive. And then in the second webinar, Data and Climate, diving deeper into this question of data quality and how data can be meaningful in understanding the impact of climate risk on the portfolio, but also in crafting possibly new products, for example. Then everybody came back for the second in-person session, starting with strategic risk management. So yes, reintroducing some basics, but also together sitting and discussing and drafting risk appetite statements. Yeah, so really thinking of, as an institution, how do we view this, particularly in light of all the changes that Mila has pointed out and that you all know about. And then 6, digitalization. So here we really talked about how can you make sure on the board level to understand this topic. What does it mean? Where are you as an institution on your digitalization pathway? And how do you take decisions here? How much do you actually need to know and understand, and how much can you leave to the technicians? And here we'll have some interesting also impact stories to hear a little bit later on. Then the 7th module is what may typically be called gender finance. We opted not to do that, but rather talked about a fresh lens, looking at both internal questions, talent, and markets, so the client-facing side, and asking what can the institution do to tackle things like stereotypes, existing inequalities in regards to gender, but not exclusively. And then, of course, at the end, graduation. So this was the overall program. I'm sure you may have additional questions on this. Feel free to already add questions in the chat, and then we can take them as we go, or we'll leave them to the end for the Q&A session. Let's switch to the next one, please. Yeah. So what makes this program different? So I think there are 2 key aspects which make this program different from maybe your typical cookie cutter training program that you may encounter. So on the one hand, we have a training approach where engagement with the participants by the facilitator and by the participants with each other comes first. So engagement first. Yeah, there are no 100 PowerPoint slides. I'm setting a very bad example right now, right? So there are not 100 PowerPoint slides and people sit there to passively absorb somebody else's knowledge. But we designed every minute of the training such that we give the opportunity to everybody in the room to share their experience, to exchange, to engage with the content, and this really from start to finish. And I do think this really makes a very big difference, because anybody can read a book, right? This is fine. You can take courses online. That's where you get the pure content. But here, this was about practice, and this was about engaging with one another and the facilitator. So engagement first as the first principle. Second one is that we made sure to really design the program together with practitioners. So everybody who was and is teaching in the program has first-hand experience and has very often sit not once but many times in the seats that the participants are sitting in at the moment. So, and we also spent quite some time, right? Mila and Besant, I will never forget, together with Deborah Drake, the technical advisor, the first workshop, right, where we really debated around the exact content. What are the objectives? What do we really want to achieve here? What are our key messages? So bringing together the understanding of the REGMIFA institutions that you have, and then from our world, the practitioners, and then the academic eye from the university, tying all this together to really build program that was designed for this exact purpose. Good. So that was the part where we talk a little bit about it. But you, of course, want to hear about impact. And I think this is also the trickiest, but also the most exciting part, in a way, right, of any training program that you run and get to observe. So as I said earlier, we'll come later on to statistics once the program is completed and so on. But what we looked at rather now was that we discussed with graduates and asked them, you know, what happened after you left? What was the most decisive here? And I think overall it falls into one or sometimes multiple of the following 4 categories. So what we have heard from many people, and I asked Gideon if I would be allowed to quote him here, the CEO of Premier Credit in Kenya, is really this strategic perspective on the topics we discussed. Yeah, so digitalization here was the topic, and the group discussed how to steer digitalization initiatives in the financial institutions, right? How to make sure it all fits together and how to have oversight. And then when I talked to him, he told me that 2 days after he got back to the office, he set up an innovation committee that is now in charge of overseeing all of these initiatives. He'd already drafted terms based on what the facilitator had provided as an example. So here really switching from a project-based view, yeah, rather to seeing, we need oversight here and we need a strategic perspective on all of our digitalization initiatives. Then I think one point that Mila also is very much connected to your origin story, right, is the governance quality, right? So what has changed in the boardroom? And I'm sure we'll hear more from Sadiq and Mahmoudike in a moment. But this is something that Sibia shared from Finca DRC, where she said, well, now, after having gone through that program, because we're 3 people from the board of Finca DRC, she said, well, now we make much better use of our time, right? So one of the key topics was board meetings are short. Often we start with the first points on the agenda, and then when it comes to the important stuff, then the meeting is almost over, right? So she said it's a much more purposeful discussion and use of the time in board meetings. Then sustainability integration. So we had multiple financial institutions that actually use the 5 dimensions of sustainability from SAISP. I'm happy to post a link later on in the chat that we used as a basis in module 1, but we kept going back to it throughout the program, that they used it to reshape their annual strategy. So this is something that the first cohort, remember they started in October, so many of them actually went back and did their annual planning and strategy review and so on. And then we had several that said we actually really did take the 5 dimensions, and then we basically used those to define our strategy for the future. Another example, I think, which was very interesting to hear, is that they also felt, the graduates felt more motivated and empowered to pass on some of the topics to their clients, right? So in Finca DRC, they went back and introduced ESG trainings for customers, but really breaking it down to their level. And then peer networks, I think this was one of the things that most people, again, most graduates were most excited about, is this opportunity is unique, right? It's not like at a conference where you may go around and you may meet people and you may chat here or there, but we really had in-depth conversations across so many countries, across so many financial institutions. And now, Mahmoudike, you said this so beautifully, right? They're just a phone call away. So you know exactly who to call in case you want to know how this was done in a different country, in a different institution. And I think contrary also to what may have been a fear at the start, that there would not be so much willingness to share, because sometimes we would also have institutions from the same country, this was not at all the case. So we had great openness. Of course, everybody could decide what they kept to themselves, right? But we had overall a lot of openness to discussing challenges and lessons learned by all the people in the room. Okay, good. But I think it's high time we move on, and Mahmoudike and Sadiq, we pass over to you. So you've heard your names many times now, and now it's our turn. So for today, Mahmoudike Makova, thank you for taking the time. I know that you're going through a very exciting period as the Small Enterprise Foundation, and you've recently been appointed chair, right? So this is something that we're, I think, curious to hear about, how this transition that you're going through at the moment, how the program has possibly helped you manage that transition. And then Sadiq Mwai, Finca Uganda, I think you've also shared a lot of your learnings and were quite enthusiastic. So very happy to have you here as non-executive board member from Finca Uganda. How we're going to do this is that we have a couple of questions prepared, but of course, for the audience, again, feel free to come in with questions. We're a relatively small group, so anytime you may have a question, you can post it in the chat and we can try to pick it up in the conversation directly. Good. So Mahmoudike, let's start with you. So welcome today and thank you for joining. Can you explain a bit what made this program different for you? So what were first impressions? What were your thoughts when you were invited? I'm sure it was not the first training program you have been to. So yeah, handing over to you.
Thanks, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I think it's already been mentioned. I think just the structure of the training, and I think I was one of those people who walked in. If you could imagine, a lot of us seniors in our own organizations, you walk into a training, you have your laptop, you're hoping that you can sneak in an email or two in between, because just that it's how life can be. But walking in, I remember the setup, it was almost like sitting around the fire with people sharing knowledge. And I think my biggest take was really the real live examples and stories that were shared around the setup. I think just the non-conventional setup really sent a message from the get-go that this is about people, this is about sharing, this is about making a difference.
Thank you, Mamudika. Sadiq, anything to add from your side? Also welcome and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, and again, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, yeah, happy to be here and happy to be sharing our experiences. I think I just kind of follow through what Mamudike says. Yes, the circles were quite disarming, in terms of, you get in and you see it and you're in a circle. And, immediately you just had a conversation with your neighbor. No one had set up a laptop or anything like that. But interesting enough also is that I think in the previous slides, I'm sure people must have seen some photos. One of them was a flip chart. And I look at that flip chart and I remember that flip chart was blank when we started the conversation. By the time we finished, it was a very impressive mosaic of ideas and concepts and feedback from the team. And so, yeah, so the whole setup was really exciting. It was new for, I think, most of us. We got to learn after we conversed and created a relationship. So that's what I could say. It was really, the setup was really encouraged a lot of thinking, a lot of reflection, and a lot of conversations happened. And I like that we started from a blank piece of paper. There was nothing like preempted, content here. So that was the part that we really enjoyed about the training.
Okay, can I ask both of you, like, also a bit spontaneously, what was the number one topic or concept that stuck with you? Now thinking back, now it's been a little bit, been some time, right, since February, I think, that you graduated. But what was like the one thing where you say, wow, this was really, for me, an important takeaway?
I'll go. I think for me, the people dimension around sustainability, and I think it's that because SEF is going through that transition with the founding managing director due to retire in about a year. So just looking around, obviously the succession and talent pipeline of that would have been already in place, but coming in and having to work around the knowledge transfer, around making sure that we capture and transfer the institutional memory for someone who started this organization over 35 years ago, and it's about to transition to retirement. For me, the biggest, and I felt empowered as a newly appointed chair, that I had tools now through this program to ensure that there's transfer of knowledge, and also how we manage the people part of it, employee trust, because some of these big transitions can come with anxiety and uncertainty, in the people in the organization. But that helped us put together a communication strategy around the changes that are about to come, to make sure that there's trust and people know about the change that's about to happen.
Thanks, Sadiq. What about you?
I'm trying to think of one that kind of, I think everyone just ticks the boxes, but I think the context for me is important because I joined the board in August of last year, and by the time we were doing attending the courses, we already, the board had already gone some changes, so we had new board members. So interesting enough was just to be able to understand. So I was very privileged to actually learn and understand about sustainability and what it meant. So it kind of immersed me immediately into long-term thinking rather than just looking at what's in front of us. So that gave me a lot of reflection. And when it came to think about talking about sustainability, when I saw sustainability and ESG, I always thought about disclosure, regulatory reporting. But what then came to realize later was when we looked at unpacking the sustainability question and the leadership about what we need in terms of looking at the future and long-term growth of the organization, it gave me a really almost like a front row seat in terms of what is happening. And then you have all the peers around you talking about what's happening in their own institution. So it really, that for me stood out very well. And then I'm a chair of the risk committee where ESG sits. I remember after that ESG sustainability discussion, calling back to our head of risk and sharing with her some of the things I'd learned. And it was exciting because she was actually preparing a policy. And I think I remember talking to one of the facilitators and saying, you know what, we are going to change a few things based on what we've learned today. So it was that quick. It was just a matter of, you hear it, you listen to, you hear it, you kind of discuss with people back home. So it was quite interesting that it was not just, waiting for the 5 days and then go back. And it was a good conversation. So I think that for me kind of helped to be able to create a realistic approach to what we are actually learning and going through, and then applying it. So it was not like, we'll apply it for 6 months or 8 months. It's something that says, this is relevant. Can we see what we can do about it? So that was really, I think that struck with me across all. ESG struck me the most. But another one that was really interesting was the people in the lens. I know you call it gender, but because at the point you were actually discussing that, you also had, because I also oversee I'm a chair of the innovation committee. So we were talking about, products and services for women. And that lens also gave me a gate of, something to reflect. And again, remember, taking a snapshot and sending it back to the head of innovation and product and saying, oh, you know what, think about this when you're coming, joking through about what's coming up next for us. And it was really not just a directive, but just sharing. And it was something that really resonated with all of us. So yeah, so that was something that I think was really great, in what we went through.
Thank you, Sadiq, and thank you, Mamudike, for sharing. So I think it goes back to this point when I said at the beginning that it was such a luxury in the sense that you guys actually spend so much time, right? Mamudike, you said, everybody kind of expecting to also kind of work half the day, but of course that did not work out, but that you guys also took the time, right? And you really were there and were very present, and that you also took so much back and took immediate decisions, right? Even before the program had ended, already sharing with your colleagues what you learned, making small changes, taking decisions. I think this is something that I find the most exciting to see. Now this was, apologies, my chair. Can I ask both of you another question? So I'm wondering, you've already given examples on how you applied the things that we discussed, but I wonder, what has changed in the dynamic in your board? So Sadiq, you guys had in total 4 people, right? 2 in the first and 2 in the second cohort from Finca Uganda, if I'm not mistaken, both non-executive and executive board members. And Mamudike, you guys came with 3 people in the first cohort, right? So it really joint experience. So I wonder, what is different now compared to how it was before in the boardroom?
I think, so for us, we currently looking for 2 board members. We are looking to beef up our board because we've had 2 board members leave the board. And I think having been through the program and gone through the governance and the diversity part of the board composition, we are looking at the skill set that we need in the board, particularly around IT, given the changes in the technological landscape. So I think that's the main change, to consider the diversity of skills within our board. So that's the big thing as we are in the process of finding 2 new board members.
Yeah, so relating back to what we discussed, right, we had sort of sketched out the board of the future, right? And we discussed the diversity, but also the competencies that need to be present. Okay, great. Sadiq.
Right. Yeah. I think for us, it's, you talk about the board of the future. We actually brought our future much closer. What has happened is, as I said, you are really favored in terms of the number of participants we had for Finca Uganda. So it helped a lot in terms of being there with when I was there, I was with the CFO, who's part of the EXCO, and of course, part of the senior management, and then the other board directors came later. So what has happened for us is that we created, not just created, it's actually formed by, almost not by design, by factors of going through this program. So what has happened is that we find our discussions are much deeper. I think the questions, even the board papers, have actually improved in terms of what are we asking as a board. We've actually gone discussed with management in terms of look at impact. What's the impact? Look at what's the resilience? In terms of behind whatever decisions we're trying to make. We had an annual operating plan for 2026 that had already been planned and of course under implementation. But we started tweaking a few things in terms of how do we report back, what kind of questions are we asking? We're asking a lot, and the discussions that are happening. So one of the role plays in the board meeting, I think one of the modules was about the questions we ask. What are you asking, and why are you asking, and what do you want to get to? So it's like almost, then look like it was something so big, but when later on you start realizing how much time are you spending on the most important items or most important issues. So that has changed really. The dynamic of the board is really great in terms of what we're asking. And I think the management and the board are much closer now. Where we had quarterly meetings, now we actually have kind of check-in between the board and management, just to be able to support them. Not that it was not happening before, but I can tell you the nature of the questions, the nature of the answers as well, not just the questions. The better questions and get better answers, and also just trying to ensure that we bring the staff along. So what is happening, I think, we have a retreat in 2 months in August, and one of the things that is actually in the agenda is sustainability and unpacking that in terms of what happens. And I think what we're trying to do, because when we start our planning, we are going to start seeing how for the next year's plan, because our strategy comes to an end this year. So we need a lot. We are going to do a lot of thinking. But I tell you, we are now armed with the tools. We had a CFO attending. We got our chief commercial operations attended the course. We had our executive director attending the course. So I think we're really armed and really excited about the future, because now we feel like we're better equipped, more knowledgeable. But more than that, about Mamodike, if I want to, he has said, he's a phone call away, and so are the other peers. So I think that just helps us, engage much better. And that maybe we don't have the answers, we can talk to other peers and ask them, what are you doing at your own institution? What can you help with? Because now those barriers were broken the time we sat around the circle.
So one part, right, Sadiq, that you said now you simply got to know each other a lot better, right? So the communication runs more smoothly and you actually collaborate much more outside of the formal board meetings. Thank you for sharing. Mamodike, did you want to add a few words also from your side to this point, or you've wrapped it up?
I'm covered. I think maybe to add that the part that Willa referred to of the residency, or I think you did, of the residency session. And I think that also helps in just getting everyone to focus on that, being aware. I know if you are home, there's a lot of other, home-related stuff that can be a distraction. But I think that residency session is very important, just to have everyone locked in and committed without any disruption.
Thank you for adding that. We did not quite lock the door, right? Okay, can we see the next slide, Deborah? That would be great. And then I think we can probably talk still a lot longer, but I would open at this point the floor to questions from the audience. So either in the chat, but also feel free to take the microphone and please go ahead. I think we're a relatively small group. Laura, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Laura. I'm also, like my colleague Edwige, one of the members of the board of REGMIFA. So I'm incredibly grateful for hearing your testimonies, especially Mamodike and Sadiq. Very impressive. And I was curious because hearing you, I've got the impression that you were surprised by how this training was delivered. There were some aspects that you did not expect. So what made you choose to go to that training in the first place? So I'm more interested in what incentivized you to join this training, because as you mentioned, you've probably done other trainings in the past. So what made the difference for you?
Thank you for the question. So Mamodike, Sadiq, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I think, like I said, the way it was as I joined the board in August of last year, and we had a discussion in terms of what kind of training do the board members need to go through. So when the training came up in the program, we discussed the program. It was not so much in terms of what am I going to expect, in the different training. It was really just the topics that were in the program that allowed us to actually look at it and say, yes, I think this would be interesting to be able to go and listen to get some training on, and then hopefully come and, as I said, bring it back to the rest of the board and the rest of the management. I think the surprise was really just the way the format and just how it was unveiled and all that. But in terms of the program, just with the module, you think, okay, these are the modules we're going to see. So Mamodike came with a laptop, and most of us actually did so. I thought we were going to open a laptop and start looking at slides and all that. So one was actually the program in terms of the topics. and the content, but the delivery was actually absolutely good, very favorable.
Yeah, I think the topic itself, sustainability, I think for us, for our organization, like I mentioned, with the transition of a founding managing director moving on, I think the question of the sustainability of the organization, it's actually high on everyone's agenda to say, when John leaves, how do we make sure that the organization he's built over the years, obviously with support of everyone, is sustainable? I think that topic. But I mean, working in there, we were already in Cape Town, there was no turning back. We just had to put our laptops aside and engage, which was quite valuable.
It's great to hear. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for the first question. Who else would like to ask a question? We have a little bit of time, so please go ahead. Anything on the topics, but also hearing more from Sadiq or Mamudike or from Wila. Please go ahead with questions, should you have any.
Maybe I can, sorry, I'm going to ask another question then, if I may. So you mentioned that sustainability was something that was particularly attracting in the program. So I'm wondering if it's a general trend, if you feel that, well, maybe let me ask first, why do you think that sustainability is important? I mean, I have a pretty good idea, but I'm interested in, from your perspective, in your organization, is this an important topic? And yeah, what you learned during the training, is it also something that is that is going to help you also serve your clients better? Thank you.
Yes, I think for us, and I learned from the session that it was the case for most of the organization that were there, just coming out of COVID, with clients having had to endure a lot of pressure that just were brought about by the pandemic. In our case, also there were changes. I mean, we're still in a process where we saying we need to get back to the pre-COVID rather safe way of doing things. So there was a question of whether post-COVID, with all the challenges our clients experience, are we really still sustainable as an organization? So I think that's why it was top of mind, because we were seeing numbers were coming through that had never been seen in the history of our organization, and that really got us to ask a lot of questions. And as a result, January this year, I think before we went back for the second session, we had our strategy session where things like climate change were top of the agenda to make sure that our clients can withstand those pressures when they come due to climate changes. Also, us as an organization, can we withstand the climate change issues? And these are some of the things that were covered in the training around sustainability.
If I may add just on that one on sustainability, I think from my own experiences, when the initial thinking was sustainability was, a single dimension item, whether it's ESG, reading, in terms of how we managing, particularly our disclosures, looking in terms of it from a single dimension. And when in the training, I mean, I'll talk about myself, of course, it became 5-dimensional. It actually was revealed there are 5 dimensions of sustainability. So that then expanded the thinking in terms of, okay, it's not just, it's not a single dimension item or issue. It's a multiple dimensional issue. And that by itself, allowed us, because Finca is a 32-year-old organization in Uganda, and you think of sustainability because we've been here for 30 years plus, and you're sustainable. But when you look at it from a dimension point of view, then realize actually it's not just that; it's more than just being able to be there every year. It's actually in terms of the impact, and we are looking at impact to our customers. So that again created a good backdrop to what we want to do going forward. So I think that for us was the thing that really helped us to really understand and be able to start embedding sustainability thinking across the organization.
Thank you. Nice to hear.
If I may, I wanted to ask a question as well to both of you. I'm curious to know about this network. You both mentioned how important this side was. So how are you able, how do you make sure you sustain the network after the program, and how do you capitalize on that?
Actually, as you are asking the question, I actually think we could do more, but currently I know I just reach out individually to the contact I made. Like I keep thinking, I don't know when would I have had an opportunity to ring up a CFO at Finca Uganda if it wasn't of this program. So it's individual, but I think there's more that could be done to foster this in a formalized way to ensure that we stay in touch, and even if it's a session here and there once a year, just to catch up and see what challenges is everyone experiencing, and if they could be a continuous peer learning. So currently it's individual from my side.
Thank you. Sadiq, do you want to add?
Certainly, yeah, I agree with Mamudiki. It's individual. I think by the time we're living here, we had each other's contacts, and but much is not formalized in any other way, but it is really driven by individual, contacts and asking, not necessarily as a group, but more so on a one-on-one or as the institution may require.
Excellent, thank you. I think I saw Yekbun's hand up. Yekbun, do you want to ask a question?
I cannot hear Yekbun. Can the others?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I can see you speaking, but we can't hear you, indeed.
Yeah. No, has not changed.
No. Otherwise, you can post the question. If you can hear us, maybe you can post the question in the chat, and then I will share it. Okay, great.
Good. While we wait for Yekbun to put a question in the chat, are there other questions? We probably have time for Yekbun's and one more question.
I have a question for the SASD team. So how are you going to measure the impact of the SLP? Maybe on at institution level, or even, let's be challenging, at beneficiary level or clients level.
If I may, I hope you can hear me. Bazant here.
Yes,
we can hear you.
Definitely, in terms of at institutional level, in terms of qualitatively, what we will look at, usually when we commission TA, it's through the feedback that is coming from the investment committee or due diligence. So we'll be hoping to really be able to see an improvement or a trend in terms of the gaps that have been closed, noting specifically for institutions that have participated in the SLP as they come up for new investments from the IC. Have previous issues that were flagged, have they been addressed? So that will really be a practical way of trying to see if there's been a change. More from a beneficiary level and maybe on a quantitative level, we will be having at the end of this year, early next year, an impact evaluation of much of the TA that we've provided. So there's going to be, again, also quite a specific focus to try to understand if institutions that have participated in the SLP maybe would be performing better than others which haven't. So those are just some of the considerations right now in terms of some form of a comparison of SLP participants versus none. And then on a longitudinal basis, if the issues that have been flagged previously, if there seems to have been an improvement. Those are the early thoughts on how we can try to really qualitatively measure the impact of the program.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Bazant.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can
Yes.
hear you. Great.
Apologies. Yeah, I mean, thank you. I actually had the exact same question as Edwige, so no need for repeating that. Maybe I can mention that I had the chance to visit Finca in DRC because there was testimonies from Sibia and Lolly. And I spoke to Mirela, who's the CEO, and she was saying, I also want to be part of this because she didn't have a chance to participate. Just, yeah, so I mean, thank you for sharing all your experience and, you know, what you could bring from the learning experience. That's super useful. And thank you for to IPC also for organizing this webinar.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Yekmun. Interesting to hear from the field. I'm being cautious of time. I think we still have just a couple of minutes for the closing remarks. So I want to take this opportunity to maybe put forward some key elements. I think that overall what we intended and what we are very happy to see is that we are able to deploy a program where everybody understands that sustainability is not just about deploying the right policy and procedures or reporting tools, but it's also about how you are able to deep root the seeds for transformation. And this is really the human side that we were looking for and that we can see. It's also about how to build almost like coalitions, like a continental coalitions around across the continent with senior leaders in institutions that are able to reach out to each other, share what works, share what fails, so that they are able to fast track their growth in a way, taking into account lessons learned from elsewhere. And so we're very, very happy to see such things happening. I can also share that one deputy general manager from an institution shared with me that after the program, she was planning a country visit to another institution so that they can observe how they are developing some of their tools. And this I found very interesting because this goes beyond technical assistance. It's cost for them on their own funds, but obviously they have enough background to see that this is also an investment. So our pride is to be able to demonstrate that if well done, technical assistance also support in reducing risk, because we believe that better governed institutions are also more resilient investees. And we believe that technical assistance delivers impact. And when we do fund level TA, and we make it in a way that creates peer exchange, we are able to do much more than any bilateral exchange could do. So many thanks again to the IPC UCT consortium for the work done. Many thanks to the REGMIFA Technical Assistance Facility team. I want to give a special thank you to Mamodike and Sadiq. I think your insights were really the best part of this session, because this shows us the reality on the ground. We were not lucky enough to be in the classrooms with you throughout the training. I was lucky enough to be there a couple of days for a session, but I'm happy that you are able to share also with a wider audience. And I want to also give a special thanks to our investors, especially KfW, that allowed for this program to exist. Keep in mind that what we've heard today is not the end of the story. There's a third cohort that is currently underway. And also, based on that third cohort, we'll see whether there's a possibility to continue this further. What we know is that this kind of investment makes our portfolio stronger, and we hope that you all agree with this. I would like to close on this note. I believe we all have other engagement as well, and we'll be happy to see you in the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.